Hi, I'm Ethan Wong, and today I'm here talking with Adib Khorram.
Hi, I'm Adib Khorram. I am the author of several books for young readers. Uh, Perhaps best well known for Darius the Great is Not Okay, as well as its sequel, Darius the Great Deserves Better, the picture book, Seven Special Somethings, a Noru story. And my next book will be Kiss and Tell, which comes out in March of 2022.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, thank
So
you so
we'll get
much.
straight
I'm
into
so
the
excited to
question.
be here.
Thank you. And so something I wanted to ask, just on a very base level, in terms of like questions that could apply to a lot of things, which is how does the idea, or very generally speaking, of course, how does the idea for a work, a book, a picture book, or just anything kind of develop in your head? And where does it come from? How does that process work?
Interesting. I would say every single book has kind of come from a different place, and there's no one way um, that it happens. That would make it so much easier if it did. Sometimes it'll start with a question I have, like, what's in a name, which is kind of where Darius the Great is Not Okay came from. I was thinking about the name Darius and the historical connections there. And um, sometimes like someone will say something to me and that will kind of spark an idea for a story. Um, like the picture book actually came from my agent saying to me, "Oh, so many people loved like learning about Norus in your book. Have you ever thought about trying to write something else about it, like a book for younger readers?" And I was like, "Ooh, no, I haven't, but I am now." Um, with Kiss and Tell, actually, which is about a boy band. Um, that actually came from like an article I read about food poisoning at an awards show. And I was like, oh, I wonder what would happen if that was like at a big like music show. But there's no food poisoning in the book at all. But somehow that just sent my mind spiraling. I think, the my writer brain at least is just kind of constantly taking in the world and occasionally spitting out nuggets and other times occasionally spitting out complete garbage.
Yeah, I think that's something notable to kind of realize is that sometimes ideas come from completely tangential points, it seems like. And at the same time, a lot of those points, you kind of develop a sentimentality around them just because you came up with them and then you thought of the possibilities of it. But sometimes they don't necessarily go anywhere either, which is unfortunate. But
Oh yeah, I have a lot of trunked novels because they were just terrible. But also, the more I do this, the less precious I get about my ideas, um, because I'm confident, at least for now, that there will in fact be more ideas eventually.
yeah, I think that's a good mindset to kind of adopt about it because otherwise it gets very hard to move on.
I think one of the great kind of attrition points for any creator is the very first time you let go of a project that's not working. That's like a big stumbling block for a lot of people.
Yeah. So kind of getting into that actually, which is so you've come up with an idea, right? You've kind of been thinking about it a little, something came up in your life that made you want to write about it. But then how do you kind of enforce your consistency on that basis? Because you've thought of the idea and now you know you want to write about it. But novels are kind of different from my expertise. My expertise is like poetry. So for poetry, I could sit down in one afternoon, turn out a poem, and then all I have to do really later is come back, rework it, kind of work out the kinks or something like that, right? I could rewrite it, but it's so short that it doesn't matter too much. But with a novel, there's a very big commitment, I feel, to it. So how does that kind of work for you?
Um, for me, novels are just they're what I enjoy reading. They're what makes sense to my kind of storytelling aesthetic. I like the ability to kind of dive into the psychology of a character or a group of characters. I like the chance to plant kind of seeds of plot and then watch how they will sprout. And I like getting the chance to just kind of sit uh, with an emotion for a while. And so for me, I don't know that there's any discipline that I am particularly applying, other than the discipline to actually do the work because I have bills to pay. But for me, Um, I don't know. It's a little like asking a painter like why they paint. I think the paint speaks to the painter, and for me, the novel speaks to me. And so that's just kind of how I express myself. It is very different from trying to write poetry. There's kind of a different brain space required to hold these pieces in your head. But I think, as with all projects, you break them into manageable chunks. You keep notebooks and journals, uh, or in my case, I literally at the bottom of every document, I always have like a few notes of what I want to do next, or what I want to do 3 or 5 days down the line. Uh, and you also rely on a good editor to let you know when you've gone astray.
Yeah, I think that's kind of touches on a lot of the main points I was wondering about, especially kind of this idea of, well, it feels as if every time you kind of write a piece of it, it'll kind of, you've just left it so open that you're not sure what to do next. I think your method is kind of enforcing upon that. And something I kind of want to branch off that is that when you've written a novel, are you do you tend to go towards planning out the entire, or for the most part, planning out a very broad outline of what the entire plot looks like and then going into each part? Or do you kind of start from a specific point, kind of have a vague idea of where you're getting, and then fill in the gaps?
Uh, for the most part, I write by the seat of my pants. I usually have a character and a problem, and once they feel fully formed enough, I sit down and go. And um, that's really how I do my best work. I discover as I go along. That being said, trying to be a working author that pays rent and stuff, I've had to learn to try to do outlines with varying degrees of success. Sometimes I'll write an outline and it will make perfect sense, and then the book will follow that outline really closely. Um, Sometimes I'll write an outline and then very quickly realize it's not what the story is really about, and the only way I can learn that is by writing the story. And um, the last few things I've done have actually been like that, where I wrote a fairly significant outline and it kind of lacked soul. But once I sat down and started writing and just writing what the story felt like it needed, I kind of discovered the story's soul. Um, so I'd say I write in my heart. I really just like to kind of discover as I go along. But the reality of business means that sometimes I need to try and plan a little more,
Yeah,
and hope for the best.
yeah, I think that idea of kind of, because it's all right for the most part, especially in a first draft or two, to wing it, or whatever you want to call it, to think of it as you go and then work it all out as you revisit. And so something I think we already touched on a little bit is, what themes do you kind of generally explore in your work? Because I know you mentioned about how characters tend to play a big role in how you want to develop your work. If you could expand on that a little more.
Yeah, I find I'm very consistently drawn to characters of identity, or questions of identity, racial identity, sexual identity, um, you know, ableist, able-bodied or not identity, marginalized identities in general. I find myself thinking about diaspora a lot. Um, I find myself thinking about liminal spaces a lot. As someone who's biracial, I think I've lived a lot of my life in a liminal space, and so I frequently uh, come back to that. Um, I also think, especially lately, I guess probably since the pandemic, um, basically everything I have written in the pandemic has ended up with either a hopeful ending or a happy ending, because I think that's what I really need in my life right now, is to believe that there can be hope and happiness for us. Whereas before, I tended to feel very comfortable working in like the bittersweet or occasionally sad ending space. But I'm not feeling any bittersweetness right now. I just want all of the sweetness, no bitterness. So that's been really interesting to kind of see my own evolution. Yeah, I think those are the ones that I can self-identify.
Yeah. And it comes with writing with these sorts of issues, which is uh, something I kind of picked up on when you were talking about it, is how much do you think, maybe it's changed over time. I know we've talked a little bit about how, well, you need to pay the bills, but uh, how much,
Capitalism.
yeah, right. But how much of it does it feel, or maybe it felt more like this at the beginning, of novels are writing for yourself in the way that you want to, I'm having a hard time describing this, but kind of writing a novel in the way that you need it, and not just in the way that you need to write it, if that makes any sense.
I think I know what you're getting at. I think, are you asking if I kind of imagine a future reader or future sales as I'm writing versus writing to please myself?
Yeah, kind of like that.
Yeah, I do say I think I'm still a very selfish writer, and I do still write primarily to please myself. I feel like I write to please myself, and then I edit to please a wider audience. Um, at the end of the day, no one has managed to figure out how to predict what's going to sell, what will be a bestseller, what will be popular, what will be a classic. Um, and I think the only really way forward is to just write books that are pleasing to me. I mean, I never never would have believed that anyone would buy my first book, about a kid who goes to Iran to visit his family. I was like, well, no one in America wants to read about that. Um, Surprise, surprise, people did, and the book did fairly well. Um, so I think sometimes you just have to please yourself because you're the only one that you know how to please, really, and just hope that the market will see to itself. And so far, that has worked okay. And we'll, give me 5 years if I'm still doing this. We'll see if I've had to reassess or not.
All right. Uh,
Ooh, and I think also, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off,
oh, no problem.
but I was thinking something that I think a lot of other authors that have been doing this longer, that, as we've talked about building a career, um, part of it is learning to find ways of pleasing yourself no matter what the project is. That's a really useful skill to have.
That makes sense. And sort of wrapping up the last official question, which is, uh, I've noticed that you've mentioned a lot writing towards younger audiences. What do you think is special to you about writing for younger audiences specifically?
Ooh, I mean, first of all, young people are much more interesting than adults in large part, especially I think when it comes to reading. All the adult books I remember reading when I was growing up were really boring, self-important, and even going back maybe 5 or 10 years, I feel like there was one summer where I read 3 different books that were all about like white men going through middle age or midlife crises, getting divorced, and getting diagnosed with celiac disease. It was like a really weird time. But then you look at like the breadth of children's books, and they're exciting, they're different, they're unique, they are emotionally immediate, uh, and truthful in a way that I think sometimes adult authors think that they have to kind of couch things in symbolism and metaphor and subtext. Sometimes it's really okay to just say what you want to say. Not only that, but I look at the generations that came before mine, and it's really hard to ignore the fact that they have not left a better world than the one that they found. They've left a worse one. And I feel like it's really important to try to build a better world. And I see writing for young people as a clearer path for me to do my part on that. Back in the before times, I would, get to visit schools and talk to young people that were actually reading my book, and be amazed at how much kinder and more empathetic and more engaged they were than I was at that age. And that does give me a little bit of hope sometimes, which I feel like we all desperately need.
Yeah. And before we kind of close out, I just wanted to ask if you have any bits of advice you'd give to anyone who wants to write their own novels.
I'm always wary of advice because I feel like what works for one person is never going to work for another. So my advice is to take all the advice and also to take none of the advice, to try out lots of things. Some people say that you should write every day. So try writing every day and see if that works for you. Some people say you should only write when you feel like it. Should try that too. Some people say you take the weekends off. That's actually what I really like. Some people say, some people like to make outlines. Try outlining your books. I like to write by the seat of my pants. Try doing that. Try lots of things and see what works for you, because ultimately, the most important person to please with any project is yourself. And then also on a practical level, one of my favorite pieces of advice I ever got that I did take and that did work for me was to take my favorite book and literally just type it out on my computer, word for word. It teaches you something about kind of the muscle memory of sitting down to write a book, as well as making you absorb the sentences in a way that you don't when you're just reading, because you're having to reproduce them. And I feel like that was one thing that really helped me level up my own craft. And it's something that I kind of return to frequently when I'm feeling stuck. So yeah, those are my bits of advice.
That was great. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you. My pleasure.